Excellent. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. We will go ahead and get started, respecting all of your busy agendas, and we are very happy to have you here to how to read and use your strategic feedback report from WWF as participants of the One Planet City Challenge. Can I have the next slide, please? Excellent. I will spend very little time on this slide because you will hear from most of these colleagues, but we have two WWF participants in this call, myself as the Global Cities Lead and my colleague Siri from our technical team, and she will be explaining our strategic feedback report. We also have an excellent panel, Linda Birkdahl from the city of Lund in Sweden, as well as Björn Sigurdsson, who used to work for a Swedish city as well, but now is a climate advisor to WWF. I would like to also note that this call is to really understand what is the strategic feedback report and to see the behind the scenes of this report, to be inspired on how you can use it and ask questions. This is really an open dialogue to work with you. Next slide, please. Just a quick reminder of our housekeeping. Do change your name on Zoom, and we will share in the chat how to do that. Please keep yourself muted until we get to the question part. And also, we do have interpretation in Spanish and in Portuguese, as was mentioned. Use the chat for comments. And now, please open your strategic feedback report. Next slide, please. Okay, so just to kind of set the context, this is about WWF's One Planet City Challenge and our strategic feedback report, but nothing happens in isolation. This was arguably 2023 was the warmest year on record, and we have temporarily, at least, surpassed the critical 1.5 degrees Celsius global warming target. Hopefully, especially with the work that you were doing, we'll move back in the right direction, but this is some pretty critical news. At the same time, do recall that, I'm sorry, could someone please mute yourselves? Thank you. And if we could go to the next slide, while this is very dire news, there's been a lot of key developments, especially when it comes to cities, most notably in the recent UN climate conference, COP28, that happened at the end of last year. For the first time, there was a COP presidency-led local climate action summit, so really bringing cities to the center of the climate conference. Also with pledges on financial support for cities, as well as integrating cities into new climate action plans from countries. So these are called the nationally determined contributions. So hopefully if your country has, for example, signed on to this coalition of high ambition, multi-level partners, they have agreed to work with cities and local leaders in the evolution of their next climate plans. I also want to note that this year we'll kick off the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, or the IPCC, which will draft a special report on cities and climate change. And this is the only special report that the IPCC will have in the next 5 to 7 years. So this is a very big deal and really puts cities so central to addressing climate change. Next slide, please. But here, zooming even further from the global science and scary facts to the exciting policy wins for cities, we really want to celebrate that this year we had more than 350 cities in the One Planet City Challenge, including all of you. We have had nearly 900 cities since this started more than 10 years ago from about 70 countries. So this is truly an international program that WWF is happy to spearhead with you all. Next slide, please. I think this one we were going to skip over, so I will actually go forward in this next, but just to say that we are evolving in the One Planet City Challenge and into our 2-year cycle. So this is, first we have worked with all of you to submit your data. Now this is about the assessment and feedback. We really want to work with you to help you meet and exceed your climate targets. So we're very happy that you have joined us here today. And without further ado, I'd like to move on to the next slide and introduce my colleague Siri, who will take us through the Strategic Feedback Report, or as you might have seen, the SFR, as we've called it. Over to you, Siri.
Thank you. Can you hear me well, Jennifer?
I do hear you fine. Thank you.
Perfect. So thank you for that introduction, and good morning and good afternoon, everyone. My name is Siri Friberg Gusland, and in this presentation, we will look at how to read your strategic feedback report. And if you have any questions or comments during the presentation, I warmly welcome and encourage you to put those in the chat, and then my brilliant tech colleague Gara will respond to you there. So without any further ado, let's get started. So the first question we might ask ourselves is, why do we have a strategic feedback report? And the main purpose of the report is to help you recognize what your city or local government is doing well, but also, and more importantly, highlight what opportunities your city has to improve. And in the report, we do this by providing you with an overview or a big picture of your climate action that highlights both your strengths and your weaknesses. Furthermore, the report can help you create compelling arguments to gain support for strengthening action. And finally, as the report sheds light not only on the areas of improvement, but also on what you're already doing well, it can help you get recognition for those efforts and inspire other cities to follow. Now, how do we produce the feedback? In the OPCC, we use a collection of methods and criteria that we call the OPCC Assessment Framework. And we use this framework to measure your city's level of vision and your city's level of impact. So where you want to go and how you plan to get there. Now, the OPCC Assessment Framework consists of 3 components. We have the data integrity diagnosis, which is what we used for your GAPS report. We have the scoring criteria, which is what we used to quantitatively evaluate your city's vision and impact. And finally, we have the complementary methods, which we use to generate the prospective feedback. I will talk a bit more about the complementary methods later when we look at the report more in detail. But if you want to have a closer look at all of the components of the framework, which I, of course, would warmly recommend that you do, you can find a detailed description of these in the technical document that is located on our website. And I believe that one of my colleagues will share a link to this document in the chat. Now, for today's session, we will focus on the following elements of the report: your vision and impact, your city's climate journey steps, the assessment of your hazards and greenhouse gas emissions, your targets and actions, and prospective recommendations to your climate actions. So let's have a look. On page 5 in your report, we have a graph showing the overall results of the assessment of your city. And you can use this graph to see how strong and well-balanced your goals and actions are. Furthermore, if we take a closer look, and again, I hope you can see this on your screens, we see that there are several small gray crosses here, and these crosses represent other participants from your country. So you can also use the graph to get an idea of how your efforts compare to other cities and to gain an awareness of what the climate leadership looks like in your country. Moving on to pages 6 and 7, we have the climate journey steps. And this is a concept that we have borrowed from GCOM, or the Global Covenant of Mayors, to try and provide more clarity around which steps or stages that cities should follow to improve their climate action. And if we look at the 5 steps, we see that the first step is to assess your greenhouse gas emissions and to identify what hazards you face. Step number 2, when we have the overview, we can move on to step 2, where we set mitigation targets to reduce the calculated emissions and adaptation goals to address the identified risks. And then once we've set those targets and goals, we can move on to step 3, where we develop action plans directed towards achieving those targets and goals. Step 4, we implement the strategies and actions that we identified in the plans. And finally, step 5, we monitor to keep track of our progress and adapt our plans as needed. And in the report, the climate journey steps are visualized on page 7. In this tree diagram, you can see the aggregated results of your city per journey step. And rather than looking at the specific scores here, what we would encourage you to do is to interpret the results in terms of the opportunities that it offers, whether it's in the design stage, implementation stage, monitoring stage. We encourage you to use the diagram to help you prioritize where to direct your efforts. Moving on to risks and emissions. On page 8, we have 8 icons that visualize what elements should be included in a city's CRVA, or Climate Risk and Vulnerability Assessment. And the elements that you have included will be colored in green or teal color. But again, maybe of more interest are the gray or blank elements, as they point you to other areas of opportunities that you can include in your assessment as you move forward with your work. And then on page 9, there is a so-called Sankey diagram, and this illustrates how your reported greenhouse gas emissions are distributed across sectors and scopes of emissions. And here we encourage that you analyze this graph to identify what areas need stronger climate targets and what strategies are more relevant to reduce your emissions. As part of the assessment, we also revise your city's adaptation goals, mitigation targets, and your energy access and poverty targets, which you can find on pages 10 to 12 in your report. And with regards to the mitigation targets, we analyze how your targets compare to the Paris Agreement's most ambitious target of limiting global warming to 1.5 degrees. And to do this, we use the OPCC 1.5 degree alignment method, which is a method recognized by the Science Based Targets Network. And it's also actually one of the components of the complementary methods that I mentioned earlier. And on page 11 in the report, this graph tells you how close to or how far away from you are from the benchmarks defined by the OPCC method. Then on page 12, there is a bar chart, and that chart compares your total greenhouse gas emissions in yellow versus your planned greenhouse gas emissions in gray across different sectors. And this graph can help you identify which areas need stronger climate action, and therefore it can help you develop a mitigation action plan to reduce the gap between your targets and your emissions. Finally, pages 13 to 16 in the report includes the prospective potential actions that cities can take, both related to mitigation and adaptation. So on page 13, there is a table showing potential mitigation actions for your city, and which actions we have suggested depends on 2 things. Number 1, your city's physical characteristics, and number 2, the regional context of your city. And based on this information, we suggest strategies inspired by the IPCC AR6 report that can lead to the greatest positive cascading effects in your city. And if you click on the suggested actions in your report, you can visit examples from other cities. Then, with regards to adaptation, we have a 3-fold table. And the first column looks at what level of risk your reported hazards pose today and what level of risk they are expected to pose in the future, with a traffic light coding system to signal which risks have greater urgency. The second column in the table looks at how these hazards are being addressed today, and then the third column suggests which actions can be applied to address them in the future. And these suggestions are based on other cities' similar experience with those hazards in the region. And again, if you want to have a closer look at either the complementary methods that we went through now or any of the other components of the OPCC assessment framework, you can find all the details in the technical document that is located on our website. And with this, we have reached the end of my presentation. Please keep posting any questions in the chat. Thanks for your attention, and I give the word back to you, Jennifer.
Thank you, Siri. That was a very useful presentation of our strategic feedback report. And we're extremely excited about this. It has really developed quite considerably over the last few years to help cities to move towards that 1.5 Celsius target, to really align to the Paris Agreement locally, and to work and learn with all of you together on this. Now, if I could have the next slide, please. I would like to introduce our wonderful panel today here, some experts who have worked in city government and also have really applied some of this teachings and methods together. So without further ado, it's absolutely wonderful to welcome Linda Bökdahl from the city of Lund in the south of Sweden. I've known Linda for many, many years, so it's fun to see her in this capacity as well. And Björn Sigurdsund with Sustainable Advantage, who is also an expert on city data and also on climate policy work. So I'm going to ask you both a few questions, and I'm going to start with Björn. And I think I might even copy paste some of these questions to the chat so that those of you who are listening in a third language have access to that as well. So Björn, in your experience working with city climate policies and actions, can you share what has struck you more about the buildup of this report? What should other city colleagues know to feel confident about using its findings and recommendations?
Thank you, Jennifer, and thank you for inviting me to this panel. And to give a little bit of background, I have been I'm a previous climate strategist like Linda, but from the city of Uppsala and city of Stockholm, and has as such participated in the One Planet City Challenge since the beginning in 2011. So I have seen how this challenge has developed over the years. And as you say, over the last rounds, it has really taken off with this. And I think that is the basic idea, that each city gets an individual feedback based on each city's own data, and that policy advices are also to very much extent tailored, adapted to that city and where it are in the where it's situated in the world, and number of people and so on. So I think that is the very basic thing. And the second thing is, of course, that it's so rich. And over the rounds, it became more and more rich. And I have seen closely following WWF's work this year that it really has developed a lot more. I think the section on where you get policy advice on where to put your strategic emphasis, that is, I think it's page 13, recommended mitigation strategies. That is really a big development. I think thirdly, lastly, I think that the fact that it's WWF who do this gives a lot of credibility. And that is extremely useful for a climate strategist or the climate team in the city, who maybe often has to fight to get the attention. And it's easier to come and say, hey, this is this credible international organization who says this, and give us this feedback. So I think that is the main points of the whole endeavor of the OPCC and the Strategic Feedback Report. I don't know. Let's hear what Linda says.
Excellent. Björn, thank you so much. I'm glad that we can provide credibility, but we get a lot of our credibility from working with all of you, and we're so happy to have more than 100 participants in this call right now. And I'm just going to add a personal note here because it's quite fun. I've lived and studied in Lund and Uppsala, two wonderful cities in Sweden, worked in Stockholm, and now I find myself in outside of Santiago in Chile, and I see a lot of our wonderful Latin American colleagues here too. So this is sort of like coming home and working with all of you. And Linda, coming home to you, you've been part of the OPCC, the One Planet City Challenge, for many rounds now, and you have seen that it has supported your work as Lund's climate lead. Can you share how the Strategic Feedback Report has helped you to further advance your climate work in this wonderful city of Lund?
Thank you. Yes. When we got the first strategic feedback report, the really new thing for us was that we were used to benchmarking with other cities from Sweden, but not from the entire globe. And then we discovered a new thing, because we compared ourselves to other Swedish municipalities and saw that we work with energy efficiency. But from the global point of view, we didn't. And that really was something new to us. And we saw that we needed to adopt a better target covering the geographical area of our municipality when it came to energy efficiency. From the latest feedback report we got, we also used the gap report or the gap picture showing, okay, here are your emissions and this is how much your actions will solve of those emissions, and saw that there was this really huge gap when it comes to the transport sector. And we're now developing an action plan to solve that.
Excellent. Thank you so much. I'm taking some notes so that it's always useful for us to learn together and learn what is most relevant for cities, and so that we can continue to evolve this as we go forward. Now I have a question for both of you, and that is, what would be your main recommendation for our wonderful city colleagues that are here with us today from many different countries around the globe on how to use this strategic feedback report from your experience as city leaders and practitioners? So for example, is it helpful to gather some support from politicians? Or even, is there any chance that citizens might be curious about this as well? There are so many different opportunities, but how have you found this useful in your work? And I will add that question to the chat.
Okay, we start, the colleagues and I, working with this area, analyzing the report together. And we don't present the report as a whole to the politicians, but we pick, we go cherry picking, and the best things we present to the politicians, and there the pictures are really good. And now we will do that, and I think we will look into the climate adaptation part this time, where, for example, we saw that we lack, for the really high emission scenarios, what should we do if they come true? And we haven't been looking into that, and I think we need to do it. And when it comes to the citizens of Lund, we present again mainly the pictures, the illustrations, the graphs. So it's a part of our annual event, the environmental state of Lund, and we invite the citizens there so they could put questions and come with suggestions for us.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Linda. There's definitely, you can use different pieces of this report for different audiences, as you have demonstrated. And over to you, Bjorn, the same question, please. Tell me if you want me to repeat it, but I think you got it.
No, I can follow on to what Linda said, and I think it's I really like what you're doing, Linda, and that you use it for different audiences, and I think that is exactly what we can use it for, and I'm glad that you are using it for the political level, because sometimes I hear from cities I'm talking to that they hesitate to do that, but I think I do think that the whole yes, do cherry picking and choose the graphs that you want for the political level, but maybe also make it available, of course, for the interested person to read it as a whole. There is a lot of information. WWF makes it very easy for a city to well, have information in a concentrated, good format for audiences like the political level or the management level, for example. And I'm glad to hear also that you're showing for citizens. I would add also stakeholders, the organizations, the companies, the local climate protocol or local climate agreement to show and work with them. I think it's both. You asked a little bit how to use it or the idea. I think there are many for inspiration, for knowledge transmitting, learning, but also accountability in two senses, to show it for the citizens that this is what the democratic city tried to do and get some feedback on that. And also accountability. Many cities find, or climate strategies find, that gives a feedback that we have targets, that's fine, but we don't have enough sharp targets to be aligned with Paris Agreement. So here is, of course, a lot of climate strategies is putting a testimony to that they are using this to leverage towards the political level to lobby for sharper climate targets and actions, of course. So I think that's some main points. And don't forget your colleagues, we heard this morning from Istanbul that they had been working very hard to communicate and mobilize the whole administration with the report as a basis, and been doing this very successfully. So, and I heard from a city said that in Sweden that showing it to and having a conversation about the report and the challenge also made my teammates and my colleagues see that we are part of something bigger, of a community of 350 cities, but also of some people who try to do something on a global level. So I think that is also something to have on.
Thank you, Bjorn. I'm going to actually pull from what you just said, part of something bigger. And this is really why we're so happy that you're all here with us today. I also want to highlight what Linda said about, the adaptation pieces of the report. This is something that we have heard from our colleagues across the WWF network and the cities we work with, that this is crucially important. So this is really about us listening and hearing you and trying to work together on this. And the accountability piece is really important. Oftentimes in my role as kind of WWF's global cities lead, sometimes we hear some cities that say, I wish we were doing more here. Or citizens feel like they don't know what's actually happening in their city. And this is sort of an endorsement that, you know what, there's a lot more that we have to do. Every single person on this call, there's a lot more that we have to do, but we're already on our way. And that can encourage the momentum we need to continue going. So thank you so much for that wonderful and inspirational marks. And I'm getting excited to read all your reports as well. And that's going to be a lot with over 350 cities. So I have one final question to Linda before we open this up to everyone. And this is really, we have so many wonderful colleagues here. Please ask your questions in the chat. We'll try to get as many as we can in the next half of this call. But what aspects of this new report are really catching your eye? Are you looking forward to diving into with more comparison to our previous report? So this is really about looking where we have been and where we're going. And it might be a little repetitive to what we've already asked. So, take what you cherry pick from that question as you want. And then we will open this up to the rest of our colleagues.
Yes, but I go back to the climate adaptation part, because I think it's also important to try to use what you need right now in your city or municipality, because this is, our work is in cycles. We set the targets, the action plans, and then we evaluate what the results are. And now we are in a state here in Lund that we really need some input when it comes to climate adaptation. And that's also a reason for us to look more at the climate adaptation part of the strategic feedback report right now. And I think there were good suggestions, and that it's also that it's like the list with the links and so on, something we can use.
Wonderful. Great. And in the spirit of learning together, this is where we now open up the conversation to the rest of you. And I think my colleagues have been monitoring the chat. I know there's been several questions that have come through. Andrea, or would you like to bring up one of them, or do you want to copy paste it into the chat just so that we make this an open dialogue? We are many people here. We're not going to get through all of those questions, but there are definitely a few good ones. So Andrea, can I call on you for that?
Yes. Sorry, I'm trying to decide the language. But we have one question from Elvi. I'm actually going to read these questions in a row because I find that they are a little bit related. But the first question from Elvis is if there are any recommendations, maybe from Linda's and Björn's experiences, even I guess from anyone, on how to build climate indicators when they are not in national level. And then a question from Douglas just tells us, how can we achieve and leverage these climate objectives with international support and cooperation if cities do not have the resources designated to further address the challenges?
Excellent. And I believe that it will be primarily Björn and Siri and maybe Gara jumping in on responding to those questions, but I can as well. But I will hand over first to Björn and Siri and Andrea. If I can have you copy paste them in the chat just so they're fresh for everyone to see again.
Yes, maybe I can start still a little, because when it comes to data that is not available on a national level, sometimes we actually pay for getting data from different consultants, ask them for help to calculate things. But we also are very fortunate here in Lund with a big university. You see the university library behind me, and there are a lot of students, very, very skilled students, and we have had a lot of help from students doing project works and things like that, helping us develop our data and also our methods. So if you have in the vicinity students to work with, that is for free. And you also get this contact with students and might in the future have them as your colleagues. That has happened to me as well. And that's really a good way if you have a limited budget.
That is wonderful, Linda. And that's actually how I met Linda initially as a student in Lund. So many, many years ago. So this is quite fun. Björn, I saw you've unmuted yourself. If you want to jump in there as well.
No, I think it's not much to add on to what Linda says. It is a problem. It is a problem worldwide. Data accessibility in some continents more than the others. Sweden, we do have some national provided data, not always in the format for a city, so you have to recalculate it anyway. But I think that a good start, if there is a problem with that, try to, as Linda says, get a grasp of what is big and small in your emissions, and how to be able to follow up on indicators for specific sectors or specific activities. So you at least have some guidance, and that's might be the one what we have to work with, and try to do what we can from that. I hope there are certain international global actions to try to give some kind of general data based on big data collections and so on. So you might want to have a look into Global Covenant of Mayors resource material for that, or World Resource Institute for maybe some data.
Absolutely, and maybe I can just jump in on that question from not only the OPCC but broader. I'm adding a link to the chat, which was the launch of the Coalition for High Ambition Multi-Level Partnerships for Climate Action. That's a long name. That happens when it comes to the UN. But the critical piece here is that more than 70 countries have agreed to work closer with cities and local and regional authorities, including financial support, because I heard that in one of the questions. That doesn't mean that this is endless amounts of resources out there, but governments, national governments are beginning to wake up finally, that this is very important, that you are doing a lot of the action and you need resources, you need capacity, and they need to listen so that national climate plans can be as ambitious as what we are seeing in many of our cities. So do take a look at that. Many countries in Latin America as well as in North America have endorsed that pledge. So take that to your advantage as well. Do I have any other WWF colleagues that want to jump in on that question as you see fit, or we can also move on to another question? Siri or Gara, perhaps? And if not, please.
Sorry,
Andrea.
Jenny, I just want to mention Victoria. Yes, Victoria, please go. I was just going to repeat what you share in the chat.
Wonderful.
You go, please.
Yes, Victoria.
Okay, quite briefly. We did a project with 50 cities on a platform a couple of years ago, and then we looked into some related questions. So what we found was, and I can't remember the link, that there is national data that all countries, I think, report to the UN, and that is available in online libraries. So it can be a way to access at least national data. And also we came across the tool, the Curb, that is a work by the World Bank, and they have, I think, experts in that are maybe free for consultancy sometimes. And I think that that tool can be downloaded and it works with proxy data. So that can be another place to get started. Also on CDP, they have a library of resources. So I think searching and Googling a bit can take you a long way over.
What did we do before Google? And also the translation services. Nick, any other questions that can come to our attention, Andrea?
No, I don't think we have any others in the chat as of now. I can, while our colleagues come with other, our cities come with other questions, maybe I can just translate a message here from Carlos saying that okay, I'm sorry, I'm not an interpreter. But the intention of the cities is present in terms of participation. And that everyone advances with their own efforts, of course. And then because of that, Carlos just wants to thank everyone who is working in the cities, in the Masur area, and also to WWF for the accompaniment in the challenges that await.
Excellent. And Carlos is representing which city, Andrea?
It is also Masur, and I believe it is Tapa, Carlos.
Excellent. Well, I think this is it's a fun comment, not least because the One Planet City Challenge and the feedback reports that we are developing, it's both a global program, but it is also local. So I assume most of you are in close dialogue with your WWF colleagues. I see many of them on this call here with us today. So, you know, this is really kind of about opening the door to what the strategic feedback report is. It's quite general and kind of giving you the bigger picture. And if you want to go deeper into understanding what that is, we have encouraged our colleagues across the WWF networks and your country counterparts to work with you locally on this strategic feedback report, or possibly even encouraging group-based coaching where you can learn and share together. And I know that is a favorite of Bjorn, so I will hand over to you, Bjorn, to jump in there.
Thank you. I was thinking of speaking about community and learning together. I think I would like to go back to page 13 of the strategic feedback report of WWF, because that is one of the new features of the report. WWF has condensated the IPCC work on climate mitigation strategies for cities. So on page 13, you have recommended mitigation strategies tailored to your city, where it is in the world, and how densely populated it is, and etc., etc. And I think that's a really good new feature who add on to policy making and policy discussion and action, because we need a lot of more action and more cities to do more action, and also other stakeholders, of course. And Siri told us that for these strategies, there are the potential actions are taken from the list of actions that where you can choose between from the CDP eClay reporting platform, and WWF has put links to these different actions, and the link goes to the how is it called, the WWF Urban Solutions page, where everybody is trying to gather good examples of how can this be done. There is always some city somewhere who has done this and tried it. And so please first go there and learn and steal with pride and do it yourself. And mostly important, I think I know WWF invites everybody to contribute with more examples. So please, everybody, do contribute so that we get a richness of prioritized actions and strategies and so on. So, thank you.
Thank you, Bjorn. And as we told you in the beginning, we hope you have your individual strategic feedback reports from your respective city. But if you do not, we have also added what we call Panda City Report to the chat. So you can see exactly what he was referring to and what city was showing on the screen. Are there any other comments or questions? And we also welcome criticism or questions where you might think, well, why did WWF frame it this way or that way? Because, you know, this is really about us learning together. And we also want to make sure that we take in your thoughts and perspectives. I know we received quite a lot of those in the last round, and we have improved this significantly based on some of your input as well. So I'm going to just ask Andrea, are there any other questions in the chat? Not as of yet. Okay. Any other comments or ideas how we can continue to evolve this work, including from perhaps my colleagues at WWF? Well, I will say that normally when we have this many colleagues from Latin America, it is a very talkative group. So we welcome all of your questions. There are no stupid questions. We definitely, for a lot of learning here, I'm very good at asking stupid questions myself. But I will first hand over to first Linda and then Sabina. Please, Linda.
Yes, my question or suggestion is there are some links to good actions from all over the world, or as John said, they were adapted to the part of the world where my city is located. Could there in the future be the same for the adaptation actions? is my question.
Okay, so the question is the mitigation action suggestions were adapted to Sweden, or kind of a...
No, sorry, I mixed it up. Could it be that what you have done so far for the mitigation actions could be done also for the adaptation actions? If you...
Excellent. Yeah, excellent question. I'm going to, if you could also write that in the chat, just so it can be helpful for the bigger group. I'll hand over to Sabina and then invite one of my technical colleagues to respond to Linda. Sabina.
Okay, I can maybe share the link to the Urban Solution platform as well, which we are talking about right now. There are lots of examples there, and those are linked at one page, but not for adaptation. So maybe that's what we are discussing now. But yeah, I was thinking, we were talking about in the morning call, we are in a climate emergency situation, and it might feel overwhelming to look at your report and you see a lot of aspects of the climate journey. So it would be interesting to hear the panel and all of you. Is there any special aspects of this report which you find especially important or relevant, depending on if you are a beginner or if you are very advanced, now when we feel all that we need really to get started?
Thank you, Sabina. And first, I will note that Gara has answered. My colleague Gara is on a train in Sweden right now, so it's a bit hard for her to jump in. But she notes that our Urban Solutions platform, which I will share with you, is being revamped. So it will be new and fresh very soon. And we will also have adaptation examples, hopefully from some of your cities, and include these in future reports. And I just wanted to also note that the question that Sabine asks with a lot of sincerity is that we want to work with you to improve our feedback. And so this is a question open for this group, but something that you will probably be hearing from your respective WWF colleagues so that we can continue this dialogue. So if you don't feel comfortable jumping in front of a big group and you're still kind of absorbing the feedback report, do please share your insights and ideas on how to improve this with your respective WWF colleagues. And then we will make sure that all of that input comes back to us from the city's core team. Any other comments or questions here? Okay, well then maybe Siri, we can actually go forward and share what's happening in our next steps. If you could share the slides again. I know we are all very busy people. So if we can give you back a few minutes of your day, we are happy to do so. And I will also note while Siri is sharing the slides that this call has been recorded. So if anything is unclear, we will have a recording later on. But going back to our 2-year cycle. So first, you have all been with us in that journey of submitting city data. As we mentioned, we had more than 350 cities this round, which is almost 100 more than the last round. So fantastic work and collaboration with all of the cities and certainly all my WWF colleagues as well who have been supporting you on that, and our friends at CDP. Now we are in the assessment and feedback, which is the reason for this webinar today, and then some more focused work with some of your colleagues, also in your respective national or local languages. And then the next step is that we will be shortlisting cities, up to 3 per country, that will then be reviewed by an international expert jury. Now, this is where it gets both exciting and also a bit challenging. So I want to just reiterate that we can only, unfortunately, pick 3 cities per country. This does not mean that any of you are lesser. On the contrary, we are so excited to be a part of this journey with you, and we are tracking progress and watching how cities' data is improving each time. So let's see that those up to 3 cities that are shortlisted are really setting the bar at a very high rate and hopefully that they can support learning and sharing amongst the other cities in your respective countries. So just to kind of encourage you all to say, you know, this is about a community. You are all part of the One Planet City Challenge community. We highlight the strongest, those who've reported the strongest data, I should say, in order to foster that learning amongst each of you. And so that will be then reviewed by the jury. We will select national winners in most cases, especially where we have enough contenders, as well as 2 global winners. And that will be from a kind of a high GDP and a lower GDP context, so that we make sure that we really see this in a fair and transparent way. And then we will also promote and celebrate those winning cities, as well as how they can teach. You know, let's put them in the spotlight that now, if you're a winning city, you have to share your lessons with all the other great cities that have joined us, so that we really continue this momentum of aligning to the Paris Agreement and also seeing climate ambition go forward. And then the final stage, as it is marked here, or kind of going at the same time, is what we will be doing with our public engagement campaign, which is called We Love Cities. And this is really where you can work closely with your WWF offices, even using the Panda logo where it is endorsed to do so. Make sure you communicate with your respective WWF offices, so that we can really see that citizens are engaged in this climate journey with us. They will offer suggestions. You can ask them to endorse the work that you're already doing, and that we can really see that the climate journey is not just about the fantastic work that local governments are doing, but also the bottom-up engagement that citizens are doing, so that we continue the momentum going forward. No city has done enough on the climate journey. There's always more to learn, and a key part of that is working with your citizens in that space. So there is a question which I see before I finally close, since we got a good question here. And I would like to hand over to one of the OPCC city leads on that. And that question is to really better understand how we choose our cities. And this is basically to do with the assessment framework. But I want to hand over to possibly Victoria or Sabina on that one, just to kind of make it very clear. We do this in a transparent way. We do have our assessment framework, but please, if one of you can jump in and state it even better than I can. Or Gada, I don't know if Gada feels comfortable, or Sabina.
I think Victoria, if you are online, would be best.
Yes, but the sun is setting in Stockholm, so I'm going to look very mysterious and dark over here. So I'll try my best. So historically, our assessment framework that we do, where we do the evaluation of your reporting to CDP, it has been developed to result in a form of scoring or points that you accumulate. And that very much steers the selection of the shortlisted cities. So in general, we look at the scoring and we choose those that have reported most diligently, let's say, on the platform, which is what we have to go on when it comes to judging local climate work. So this means that a city can in actuality perhaps be stronger, but may not have done such an extensive reporting or similar issues. And then we send our proposed shortlist to our national offices for them to see if they have any contextual red flags that they want to raise. And after that, we finalize. And then we put it towards the expert jury, which has set jury criteria, but also brings in their local expertise from the region, etc., to make the choice of the national winners. Over.
Thank you, Victoria. Always very clear. And if you have any other questions on that, keep the dialogue open with your national counterpart from WWF. And I found that there's been quite a lot of support for a comment from Rohan from the town of New Glasgow in Nova Scotia in Canada, who mentions that the municipality is a small municipality of 10,000 residents. We are familiar with that with many of our small Swedish municipalities as well. And they say, I find that the reports and frameworks are more geared towards bigger jurisdictions, and understandably so. My suggestions to perhaps include ways to make smaller jurisdictions feel a bit more represented in the process. I don't know if any of my colleagues want to comment on that at the moment, and/or I definitely think that this is something that could be interesting for us to take into consideration as we go forward. So I will pause for a moment if anyone wants to jump in to say anything there. And if not, noting that we are
Jennifer,
almost... Yes, please,
Björn,
Sabina.
maybe you have
Björn?
worked with smaller as well. What do you think?
First of all, I'd like to say that we all use the term city many times, and city challenge and so on, but we actually mean municipality, because a municipality do look very different administrative and judicial in many parts of the world. In some countries, the administrative boundary is really a city, but for many countries, a municipality holds both a countryside and a city and smaller townships and so on. So I think that could be more pointed out or highlighted in texts and communications, maybe, for what this is about. So yeah, so that's one point, maybe. Thank you.
Excellent. And we are almost at time, and I know we're all busy people. So before we close, I think we will, from our side, copy the chat. So those comments that we didn't get to, I see also one from Vita Kura. We will make sure that we highlight those suggestions, because this is really about learning together. And then I will invite Andrea to share a Zoom survey. We want to understand, has this been useful for you? What is your input? Many of you have added to the chat, but please let us know. And then I also just want to highlight what I have seen in both English and Spanish, the real praise coming from cities recognizing their WWF office counterparts. So thank you for that. We are very happy to work with our colleagues across the network, and we're happy that you are also enjoying that collaboration. This is an anonymous survey, I should add, so do not feel that you have to, you will not be reported individually on this. This is just to help us understand and guide the work. And I think at the end of that, once you have please helped us out with that, we will say goodbye for today, and you will hear from us shortly. On behalf of the WWF Cities Global Team and the One Planet City Challenge Core Team, as well as all of our wonderful colleagues across the network, thank you for joining us today, and thank you for taking this input and these ideas to heart. And we hope that we can continue working with you on creating more climate ambition for mitigation, adaptation, and more synergistic approaches to also achieve sustainable development. So that is all from me.
Thank you so much for coming, everyone. Really good to see you.
Thank you. Good luck.
Muchas gracias por la presentación y la exposición. Muy amable, gracias. Buenos días.
Thank you.
Gracias a ti.
Muchas gracias.
think we can leave this open for just a bit longer in case people are still filling out the question.
Yeah, we need to save the chat, I think.
I just saved it, so I will
right,
email
that's
it to you and some of the team.
Thank you.